Welcome back to the Padded Room. This is Talking Tech with Wayne, and I'm Wayne. Greetings to all of those who tuned into my earlier shows and are warned, pleased to make your acquaintance to my new friends. In our last couple of shows, we've explored smart devices, looking at smartphones, tablets, and the apps they run. Today, I will be exploring internet searches. The Wide World Web Consortium estimates we do over 3.5 billion Google searches each and every day. That's a whopping 92% of all searches done. They are the main international standards organization for the World Wide Web, so I'm guessing they would know. That means the search engine we will be looking at today will be Google. I know, big surprise. Also, I know that there are people out there saying searches. I do them every day. Searches. I don't need no stinking look at web searches. Wow, I can't believe how absolutely bad that was. Anyway, even though that may be true, why not consider this a recap? And who knows, you may hear something new. With even the extensive skill set that I have, I am pleasantly surprised at how often I can add to it. Because, of course, life in itself is a learning experience. So, to look at Google searches, we first need to step back before we can examine what to look for and how to look for it. We need to see. Really see where it is that we are actually looking. The internet. What is it? Let's start off with a little geek. We will start with a question. What is a network? Well, a network is two or more computers that are connected together to share a resource. In some cases, that resource may be a printer or a scanner. At its core, the internet is the granddaddy of all networks. And instead of connecting only computers and printers, the resources that are being connected and accessed are various kinds of web content. Of course, that is as simplistic of an explanation as there ever was, but I think you get the idea. So now, a little history lesson. Few people know that the internet is one of the many assets that came out of military research. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA for short, is one of the primary research arms of the U.S. military. DARPA was tasked with a problem. That problem was this. If the country were attacked and the lines of communication were cut, how could we continue to respond to the threat? This was the 60s, and the Cold War was absolutely frigid, and our lines of communication were literal telephone lines. What could we do? The answer was the internet. Actually, the answer was the ARPANET. It was the earliest incarnation of the internet. I won't bore you with the science, but it was designed to be redundant and robust. Much later, several decades in fact, the internet as we know it now emerged. On a related note, other gadgets that we take for granted got their humble start from DARPA. Inventions such as GPS and Siri would not be were it not for the tinkering of DARPA. I want you to reflect on those facts as you watch that YouTube video of that adorable hamster skateboarding. He is a cute little fella, ain't he? Well, those comic stylings that have entertained a generation wouldn't be possible without the saber rattling that was the Cold War. So, we fast forward a few decades and we come by a thing that has never been, and that was the internet. In the 90s, It was touted to be the information superhighway. The name never stuck, but I sure wish it had. I, I think as a name, it speaks truer about its very nature than the moniker Internet ever could. The information superhighway is exactly what it is. We have, for the first time in our species' history, a central repository housing the total sum of the complete human experience. Wow, that's a mouthful. That was so powerful, a statement that saying it once doesn't do it justice. We have, for the first time in our species' history, a central repository housing the sum total of the complete human experience. On top of that, we've got skateboarding, hamsters to boot. This is truly a wondrous age in which we live. I hear a question bubbling out there in the peanut gallery. This can't be the first human knowledge repository. Hasn't there been libraries almost as long as there have been the written language? Well, that is a good question. How is the internet so special when we've had libraries for much of our history? There are multiple reasons that differentiates this internet from a library. The first was access. The Great Library of Alexandria was thought to be the greatest collection of man's knowledge up to its time. But there was a catch. Any ordinary Joe just couldn't stroll up and say, "Hey, can you direct me to the aisle where I can check out that book by Homer?" I hear Odysseus is a hoot. To have a library card, you would have needed to be one of the elite class of scholars. Another issue concerns the aspect of several fires that the irreplaceable works were subjected to. When it burned down around 48 BC, it took with it many irreplaceable works that are still lost. The loss of information and art that was and is incalculable. The repeat of that level of loss has made a virtual impossibility. Remember the part about building the internet to withstand a war? Man, that's building it to last. And along with almost universal access makes it a winner in my book. The internet is available to anyone with a device and a connection, although we are still struggling globally with the digital divide. Access is still a theoretical possibility. So now we get to another problem with information that requires publication through traditional means. That is, information distribution before the internet. In Alexandria's day, if someone had an earth-shattering thought, the time between having that better mousetrap idea and getting it scribed on papyrus and shipped to the library must have taken years. In the modern age, that time would have been reduced, but even if the delay was shortened from, say, 5 years to 2 years, which was fairly routine in the years leading up to the internet age, that means that earth-shattering idea was at a minimum 2 years old, making it literally old news. So in struts the internet, warehousing the sum total of human information, offering that up to not just the elite, but everyone. That same thinker conceive of that aha in the AM. He could then package it up and serve it to be consumed by the masses by the noon hour. Now that is a wonderful workflow. So that's the how. That's the what. Now on to the how. Like most things, with this magnitude of potential, there is an equal and opposite opportunity for harm, as witnessed by the exponential growth of hate groups. Poison is not the only danger on the net, though. You need to be a discerning consumer of information. One of the advantages of the old process of idea to publication was that there was considerable vetting mechanism in place. The expense alone warranted a check and counter check system. After all, no one wanted to invest large amount of capital in getting a book to press and distributed that would only be subsequently disproven. Nowadays, there is less of that fail-safe, so you have to be far more critical in what you read. Seems daunting, but there's some simple rules of the road that can make it easier. The first and probably most important rule is do not lose your common sense. Don't disregard the same critical thinking that you've been honing all of your life. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it very well may be a mallard. I think for most of us that are of a certain age have been conditioned to trust the written word, and for good reason. The words written in most books are there because they were for the most part checked, counter-checked, and checked again. An idea whose only claim to fame are being that it was written on a website or having had it come up in a search doesn't make it reliable. So being critical is the first step. It helps to look at trusted sources first. So, if say you have a health-related question, it would be prudent to trust your health provider. That is, if they have a site. Also, sites like WebMD, which has garnered reputation for solid information, are solid choices. Also, train yourself to look for ads that masquerade as search results. In this search I did, using the term chest pain, the first result was an ad, as evidenced by the word ad. Figure that. A 2 thumbs up to Google, which always clearly labels its ads, but you have to make sure you are looking for it. As with any opinion from someone who is selling something, it is wise to weigh it. While it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but them benefiting monetarily for offering the result should be considered. The other two, WebMD and the Mayo Clinic, are sure bets. Trusting experts in their respective fields is as good a course of action on the net as it is in the real world. Another thing we should look for is the search term itself. Not every search term is equal to every other search term. For instance, take a search for a handyman. Using the search term handyman will bring back results, while searching for a handyman paired with your zip code might bring back good results. However, searching for a handyman with your zip code who does yard work may bring back excellent ones. Sometimes changing the order affects the results, so be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Affects the results, so be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Let's results, so be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Let's results, so be flexible, and as with all things, the better you'll get at it. Let's results, so be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Let's results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Let's results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get it. Results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get it. Results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get it. Results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get it. Results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get it. Results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get it. Results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, the better you'll get it. Results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, you'll get it. Results. So be flexible, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things, the more you do it, and as with all things. The more you do it, and as with all things. The more you do it, and as with all things. The more you do it, and as with all things. The more you do it, and as with all things. The more you do it, and as